structures become displaced, and it can create these sort of sinkholes, but they're becoming more and more common. Some people may have heard of situations that have come on the news every now and then of actual houses being enveloped, just, completely sinking into the ground. It's really shocking, but this sort of thing is occurring because sometimes there are crustal type disturbances that are going on, and they can create these openings, these crevices. But these particular holes that I'll be talking about seem to be endless, in a sense that they're not exactly crevices or openings that are created by tectonic plates shifting or something of that nature. But this is some sort of a phenomenon that seems to exist around the world, where there are these bits that have, I guess, naturally occurred. It's not really dug out by humans, and nobody knows where they lead. They seem to lead to this endless cavern, and people have been kind of amazed by it, and they have certain phenomena associated with it. So we're going to read about a couple of them that have, caught people's attention. So I think I found this on, somebody had sent me a meme about something else, but then it was referring to this thing called Mel's Hole, and I had never heard of it before. I used to listen to Coast all the time, but I haven't been listening recently. And anyway, this was during Art Bell's days, so there was a guy named Mel who had called into the show and described this particular structure that was close by his house, and we'll get into that in the article. But then there are a couple of other ones that I think this article mentions as well, so I think it's a little long, but we'll see how much we can get through. Okay, so let's begin. Among all of the strange stories of the mysterious and paranormal, there are often those which seem to be particularly strange and inexplicable, and which serve to grip us with their enigmas. Certainly among these are the numerous cases throughout history of bizarre holes in the earth which seem to penetrate down into paranormal oddities and anomalies that we can only grasp at the answers to. Portals to other dimensions, doorways to hell, and just plain wellsprings of surreal mysteries and horrors. Here are some of the most mysterious alleged paranormal holes in the earth that there are. By far the most well-known such mysterious hole first came to public knowledge on February 21st, 1997, when the late great radio talent Art Bell, host of the legendary radio show Coast to Coast AM, had a guest join him on the air who called himself Mel Waters and claimed to own a stretch of secluded rural property in Kittitas County, Washington, near Manastash Ridge, that apparently had something rather strange going on. As Bell listened on, as calm and inflammable as always, Waters would go over the course of a series of several shows, weave a truly incredibly bizarre tale of a mysterious hole in the earth that he had found on his property, and which seems to defy and warp reality as we know it. So, this is Art Bell in his studio, listening quietly to the tale that's unfolding. The legendary hole was apparently long known in the area as the Devil's Hole, and supposedly measured around 9 feet across, with a strange addition of seemingly hand-placed bricks lining the interior down to a depth of around 15 feet, after which it drops off into, well, no one really knows. According to Waters, the hole has been known in the area since humans had first inhabited the region, and natives and early settlers found that anything they threw into the hole would vanish into the yawning void without ever issuing any sound of actually hitting the bottom of any kind. The native people of the terrifying 80,000 feet deep. Waters also discovered at this time the unsettling fact that shouting down into the hole produced no echo, and radios brought near it would sometimes pick up strange things, such as unidentified voices and old-fashioned music from another era materializing from out of the ether. Mel's dogs were also apparently completely terrified of the hole, absolutely refusing to go anywhere near it. This is already quite weird enough as it is, but what would come to be known as Mel's hole would prove to be even stranger still. Waters claimed in one of his interviews that a local man had once thrown his recently deceased dog down into the hole and that it had come back up to him from the dead, of which he would say. One guy claims he threw his departed canine down into the hole, and the guy that did it swears the dog actually came back to him. He was a hunter, and he was out there hunting, and he saw the same dog. He had the same collar. He had the same little metal thing on his collar there, and he said it was the same dog. And he says he knew he had thrown the dog into the hole. The initial interview with Bell created a sensation that propelled the story of Mel's firmly into the pantheon of great unexplained paranormal phenomenon, and pretty soon it was being excitedly discussed and debated all over the place. Waters would end up having more interviews with Bell over the years, during which it came out that he had been experiencing some unusual activity since his story had been made public. In one incident, he was allegedly leading out to the hole to perform another experiment when he was warned away from approaching by some official-looking gentleman who told him that the area has been closed off due to a plane crash. Waters claimed that at the time he had noticed some personnel nearby who appeared to have been wearing some sort of biocontainment suits. When Waters demanded to be let in, he was apparently told in no uncertain terms that he would face serious repercussions if he should try and do so. The government then apparently leased the land from him and paid handsomely to have him relocated to Australia, all while denying that anything had happened at all. So, I guess this is an image. Let me just see if this is, I'm not sure if this is the exact Mel's hole, because I think there aren't any photographs of it, but we'll see if it says so. But this is basically what these holes look like. So they look like these, never-ending pits, basically. And, how they were formed is kind of suspicious, too, because you can sort of see that this, circular shape was created. But was it created by water? Was it, it's not something that seems to be through some sort of crustal plate type interaction, because it would be more jagged, so it's kind of interesting. But I don't think this one image is particularly is Mel's hole in particular. Okay, Waters would go on in a later interview to claim that he had spent 2 years in Australia before heading back to the United States, despite alleged warnings against doing this. After arriving, he said that he had been removed from a bus headed for Washington by police and dumped 2 weeks later onto the streets of San Francisco with IV needle marks on his arm, some of his teeth missing, and no memory of what had happened to him. He still managed to make it back to his hometown, where he had then been menaced by mysterious strangers dressed in black, and had seemingly been under constant surveillance. As to his land, he was told that it had been taken under control of by the government, and oddly enough it seemed to have been erased from an early mapping system called TerraServer, a sort of early version of Google Earth. All of this talk of government conspiracies reinvigorated interest in the mysterious Mel's hole, and this isn't even the end of the bizarre odyssey of Mel Waters, as he would claim to go on to find a second mysterious hole, this time in the Badlands of Nevada, and that was by his account every bit as strange. the Nevada hole, or they're just showing pictures because they're not claiming these photographs or anything in particular. As with the ice, the sheep was lowered down to 1,500 feet, shrieking, screaming, bucking, and kicking the whole way until it abruptly went silent. At this point, the metallic surface of the pit was said to have begun to hum and vibrate ominously, and after fleeing the scene for some time, Waters and his crew were finally able to hoist the sheep back up, after which it was found to have been gruesomely cooked on the inside by some unknown force. In addition, an anomalous tumor was purportedly found on the sheep, which seemed to be moving, and which they went to cut open to see what was going on. It was a decision that they would soon regret. As soon as it had been cut open, something quite horrifying was regurgitated forth from the sheep's carcass, which was described as looking like a fetal seal, which stared at them for some time with intelligent human-like eyes before jumping into the murky depths of the hole. Waters and company, shocked and disgusted by what they had been, wasted no time in tossing the dead sheep in after it to sail down through the bottomless abyss. To take this all the more surreal, Waters would credit the creatures with curing the cancer that he had, and even claimed that it would regularly visit the local sheep herders after that, who described it as being benevolent presence. After this incident, there were also seen various brightly colored birds loitering about the hole that were supposedly impervious to bullets, and a few instances of which Waters called a black beam emanating from the hole, which he described as looking like if you had a flashlight and it was capable of throwing up solid black. The whole tale is just about as far and absurd as it could be, yet it captured the imagination and continued to be hotly talked about, with numerous sites devoted to discussing the case of Mel's holes, and countless believers in the tale trying to deduce the locations to no avail. Since Waters had never given away the exact location of either hole, they remained a cipher, and considering that his last interview with Bell was in 2002, there was no other forthcoming information on the holes and their myriad anomalies and phenomenon. Then, in 2008, the tale was reignited when a man claiming to be a tribal medicine man named Gerald R. Osborne, or also by his tribal name Red Elk, came forward to claim that not only was Mel's story true, but that he had seen the one in Washington himself on several occasions, and that it was every bit as odd as Waters had described. Red Elk would go on to speculate that it was the entrance to some sort of underground UFO base, and would even claim that he had once seen a UFO hovering over the pit. So this is just a rendering of what he claims to have seen. And, I mean, the way that this hole is described, I don't think they have actual pictures because apparently Mel was trying to protect the area, but, it also makes it a little suspicious he could have taken photographs, that maybe it was formed by some kind of a beam, and that's why the surface is smooth, and circular. But anyway, others have come forward since who have claimed to have been to one of Mel's holes or the other, but no one has ever given any proof or made the supposed locations of the holes public, which means that these claims have only added to the mystique and mythology of the tale. The mystery of Mel Waters and his holes have never really faded, and is still discussed as much as it ever was, considering that no one seems to have ever really had any idea of where either hole could be, and that there's no evidence that Mel Waters was ever even a real person at all. Combined with the sheer bizarreness of it all, it is a distinct possibility that this was all an elaborate hoax that got out of hand to propel itself into urban legend. However, there are still plenty of people who believe Waters was telling the truth. Until the holes are found, it seems it will continue to be one of those stories that is impossible to prove or disprove, and will likely linger in the lore of great Mel's holes are by far the most well-known. They are not the first, and indeed tales of mysterious pits in the earth have been around for a while. In ancient Rome and Greece, tales of sinister bottomless holes with supernatural qualities were all the rage, and were well witnessed by scores of people. Often there would be actual temples, shrines, or even amphitheaters erected as these gates of hell, and in many cases animals would be dropped down towards these fissures to suddenly drop dead, as if by some evil force. These areas, such as one in Turkey's ancient city of Hierapolis, would often be considered the realms of the gods of the underworld, and to the people of the time it was all seen as decidedly supernatural event. It has in recent years been found that these places were constructed over cracks in the earth that seemed to vent high concentrations of CO2 gas, which would form a sort of CO2 lake, and that this would have been the reason that these animal sacrifices were snuffed out so quickly. In these cases, the priests and observers are speculated to have been situated high enough to have escaped the lethal effects of the gas, and it all would have seemed like a very mysterious occurrence, with the power of the underworld belching out from beneath the ground. It is an interesting instance of science managing to come close to an understanding of some of these mysterious holes. So, it's an interesting story. The problem with Mel Waters, however, is based on, this is from another article that I guess we don't need to read. I can just tell you what it said basically. They went on a search to find him, and they looked in the area of the particular county that he had mentioned, and there was nobody named Mel Waters that had ever lived there. So people assumed, the people who believed him, that he was just using a pseudonym, and he wanted to protect his identity and possibly the exact location, because he never gave the exact location. And I guess because he was a call-in, he didn't submit any photographs. I'm not sure if he had ever gone to the show, and sat there in person. I don't think he did. I think it was always a call-in situation, so there were never any images of this particular phenomenon. Now, I would even believe up to the point of him saying that, okay, this was on his property, and the story that was surrounding that, it becomes very suspicious when he then moves to another state and then finds another hole. That part of it makes me think that, now something is going on. Yes, it's possible, but I don't know, it just seems that because these are so rare to begin with, the chances of him going to another property and exact location, unless he sought it out in particular, asking the locals or something like that, which it doesn't seem to be. It just seems that he suddenly calls Art Pelican. It's like, I was in Australia and all this other crazy stuff happened with the government and Men in Black and all of this, and guess what, I'm in Nevada and I found another hole. That part just seems a little bit bizarre. I'm not totally unconvinced by his deal of the government agencies, though, getting involved, because if this was catching a certain amount of attention, which apparently it was, they may have come in to investigate, and part of that story might be true, that there was an actual CO2 kind of hole in there that would explain some of the natural phenomenon that he was noticing in terms of the ice experiment and the at least part of the sheep experiment, which is really a rough experiment to do, to send a live animal down there. Now, to say that a creature popped out of this sheep in such a short period of time that, they'd only lowered it for any kind of a creature to gestate, and, so some of this story just seems sheep there for a much longer time. According to his own story, it was only there for, a period of time till it stopped screaming, and then he pulls it up after they had kind of run away. But it was apparently the same day, so that just doesn't seem enough time for any sort of biological creature to do something like that. Not that it's impossible, but it's unlikely. So I don't know what was going on at that point, because this was maybe the third or fourth call, and he, I guess, had become a very popular guest, and I don't know if he was just embellishing his stories or what was going on, but some of it, the initial stuff does make sense of the, possibly the situation with the ice. If it's a CO2 based hole or some other chemical, methane based, it might have had a chemical effect on the ice block that was sent down. And if he did send an animal down there, it's understandable that it would be hot, and that it would roast them basically. And the situation of the animals not wanting to go near the hole, if it was leaking up some sort of CO2, then they would have smelled it and would have known that it's not a safe place to be. And local legends may have been, added to that, as far as the native legends were concerned, that it's a dangerous place. Maybe people were passing out as they would pass by it or things like that. So, some of these things seem plausible, but then it just seems like Mel went on a bandwagon of a different sort. And it's what I think could have even possibly happened is that, if the government had gotten to him, it's possible that they had told him that you now have to, if you're not going to retract the story, I mean, if you're not going to, say that it was made up, then you're going to have to add so that it is, that you discredit yourself, basically. And it's possible that that's what he was attempting to do in the after calls, after he supposedly was sent to Australia and then came back and went to a government facility. I mean, it's possible that something further happened and that he had to change his story, or at least make it so outrageous that it at least eliminated, people thinking that he was a legit person. Now, I read on some of these other pages that they had, that people had located Mel's hole. Apparently there are, a lot of individuals who are very interested in this particular phenomenon. There are large groups of people attempting to locate it, whether to observe it or just they think that all of these magical qualities about it may be true. There are a lot of people looking for it, so according to some of these other articles, it was found in the area that he was describing, but it is a protected area, so it's difficult to get to, because it's either fenced off or it is owned by the government at this point, and you can't actually directly get to it, but people have snuck in and found it, kind of a thing. But then again, they don't provide photographs or any kind of proof that this thing exists. So I don't know, since sinkholes or these kinds of holes are existing in other places, that people do have photographs of them. It's not like an completely absurd idea. It's just that this particular character may have been somewhat affected either by the government or I don't know what, or just by the fame and popularity that he'd received in those initial calls. The other character, Red Elk, he went on to come on the Art Bell Mel show, but then he started going on completely different tangents, basically UFO style tangents, and he was also proven to be some sort of a fraudulent character. And so I don't know who this Red Elk individual was, but I just feel that there was a little bit of a campaign to discredit the initial information that Mel Waters had given, because that first phone call, seemed like a straightforward person describing something that was not completely outlandish. But then after he had interacted with the government on some level, it seems like his story and then this Red Elk character coming out of nowhere, that those stories in regards to this Mel's hole were designed to discredit the issue and completely get people off the bandwagon, because it had created a tremendous amount of interest. So the question is, why were they concerned? Were they concerned as a safety hazard? I mean, it's not a large hole. They could definitely have somebody, have some method of protecting people from getting hurt or whatever. So what was the issue? Why would they not want people to investigate this or find out about it or see it or something? And that's not totally clear there. If it's just a CO2 based hole, that's emitting a certain amount of gas and that's a little bit dangerous for anyone to get near, then that's one thing. So they can easily make a public statement about that. But then if there are some sort of bizarre creatures living in there, which is apparently what the Roman and Greek myths, as well as some of the other stories that are from Europe, the holes that have been found there, they're all claiming that creatures come out of these things. And this is what's kind of weird. If there is something underneath that is able to crawl up out, then it would totally make sense that they would not want to, in like a government agency, if they knew about it, they would not want to admit that on any level. And then it becomes, it kind of then starts making much more sense why they would be so protective of this particular thing and want to discredit the story altogether and discredit the person and say that, he never existed, and bring in an even more crazy character to completely throw it off into another direction, because that's essentially what Red Elk did in his series of interviews. He just went on these bizarre tangents. So, I don't know, it just seems like there was some sort of an effort to discredit the original story that was coming from Mel, and I'm just wondering what the reason is. And since the older myths, the ancient tales about these holes, all are talking, and from different parts of the world, all are talking about little creatures, and then Mel himself mentions a little bizarre creature jumping out of the sheep. This makes it much more weird, and it's something that if we had any kind of real paranormal investigators in it would be something to investigate if anybody could ever find this place, if it isn't a protected type of zone. Anyway, I thought it was kind of interesting. It was something that I had not heard about, and it is a phenomenon that I guess people have been interested in since the mid-90s, based on the show, and then it just kind of created a following of itself. People go on expeditions and various things to try and find this thing, and it's just taken on a life of its own, especially if they are also believing all of the tales that came out from Mel and Red Elk afterwards. Then it attracts a whole nother level of people, and what they are seeking, from the whole, as in terms of, are they looking for some sort of paranormal activity or healing properties, because various things have been claimed about it. I'm not sure if it's just CO2 being emitted from these holes. It could be methane, there could be sulfur, there could be all kinds of things, and maybe sometimes some of those chemicals can have certain healing properties, and in certain people with certain issues, those kind of hot, what are those, the hot springs, or those, they have like sulfur type swimming holes that people go in as healing waters, and they get better. They usually have very high magnesium contents or magnesium sulfide contents, and so people notice improvements in various conditions, and it's usually because there was a mineral deficiency to begin with. So if it's already in the air, kind of getting emitted into the air, then people may notice something. This story about the dog just suddenly reappearing, that part of, I mean, again, nothing is verified, again, these stories sort of came out after his initial, normal story. Then it just, everything started becoming compounded and getting into the world of the bizarre. But anyway, this was the tale of Mel's holes. I wish there was a photograph, but they do have images of these cavernous type. Let me go to the one that's a little, yeah, these kind of deep, endless pits that have naturally apparently created. But like I said, the way that this looks, it looks like something formed this, because even if it's CO2 that is leaking out or being pushed out, even in the article it said that a crevice would be formed, so you can see this is not a perfectly circular hole. So there's sort of like maybe originally there was a crevice, but then what rounded this shape out? That's kind of bizarre. And so then it's sort of, a person does think that something beamed down, to make this sort of shape, almost like a laser, because it's really smooth. I don't know, his tale of like a black light coming from underneath. What's that about? So anyway, I wish they had more of Mel's actual stories, but I can't find, that in written form. So they have YouTube videos where they have his call-ins, and so you can listen to those, and you can, hear firsthand what he said. But anyway, it went into all kinds of different things. I found the story sort of interesting. Okay, guys, so I